They say America's highways never really sleep. Even when the last diner light goes out and the CB chatter fades into static, something still moves out there. A whisper of diesel through fog. Headlights where no road should be. And if you've driven long enough, through enough empty miles, you start to feel it, that the road remembers. Every crash, every lost driver, every promise never delivered. This isn't the kind of story you hear in truck stops, not one they'll print in overdrive or tell on Channel 19. This one comes from a man who's still out there. Somewhere. A driver who swears he was followed by something that looked like a truck, but wasn't. He said it found him once near the Oregon border, and it never stopped following. So, if you're listening to this from the cab of your rig tonight, keep an eye on your mirrors, because some headlights never turn off. People call me Cotton because I used to haul bales out of Lubbock before the contracts dried up and the reefer runs paid better. That night, it was a refrigerated trailer behind me. 42 feet of humming cold, full of butchered beef bound for a supermarket distribution center outside Appleton. Route was clean on paper. Pick up in Rockford, take 41 north. Ride the fox-colored ribbon along the marsh for a straight drop before sunup. I'd run it a dozen times, maybe more. Enough to know which mile markers lean funny, and which gas stations take the out-of-order sign on the same stall every week. It was one of those Midwestern midnights that feels hollowed out. Sky like brushed metal, no moon, stars dulled as if a hand had smeared grease over them. The air had the smell of rain on dust, like someone sprayed a hose across a hot driveway hours ago and the ground hadn't decided whether to be steam or nothing yet. I kept the cab buttoned up, windows sealed, vents set to The hum from the reefer came up through the floorboard like a second heartbeat, steady enough to keep time with the tires. CB was on low. Channel 19 was quiet. Just the occasional hiss and spit of static that sounded like someone breathing through a paper bag. I was somewhere past mile marker 198, when the first thing went off-kilter. The wheel lost its little shimmy. You get used to a truck's imperfections, the way the steering whispers at 62, the tiny vibration that lives in the column like a trapped fly. When it goes smooth, you feel it. The road under me grew to clean, to new. Asphalt shouldn't feel like silk. I glanced at the odometer, then the dash clock. 12:17. The GPS stuck on a straight line, as if the highway had no curves left. Out the passenger side window, a ditch cut through the marsh grass. Dark water slivering inside it like a vein. That's when I saw her. Headlights washed the shoulder in pale yellow. A woman stood in the ditch, not thigh deep, more like ankle. But the water glinted against the hem of a white dress that clung to her shins. She had one arm raised, waving not frantic but precise. A measured sweep, like she'd practiced how to be seen by a trucker at night and was doing it correctly. Hair slick against her skull. Face chalky, flat in the light. Her eyes flashed the way a deer's will, except there was no color, just a reflective void. I hit the hazards. Eased the rig onto the shoulder, tires grinding gravel. Reefer kept humming. I dropped from the cab and the night air slapped me with a metallic cold, like opening the door of a meat locker. Ozone sat on my tongue. Somewhere far out in the marsh, a frog chirped twice and then thought better of it. "Ma'am," I called, boots sinking a touch into the wet shoulder. "You all right? You hurt?" The ditch water showed the light, but kept its secrets. The place where she'd stood was empty. Not empty like no one had ever been there. Empty like the person had stepped out of the frame. But there were footprints. The mud by the culvert had a pattern stamped in. Bare feet, narrow. The toes splayed, as if she'd been bracing against a current. Each print was full of water, reflecting my running lights. I followed them a few paces until they simply stopped, as if she'd walked into the road and evaporated. Wind moved across the cab. I heard it inside my sealed cab. That made no sense, until I realized the driver's door was still swung wide and the dome light was on. The glow made the raindrops on the mirror look like a swarm of tiny insects. "Cole, you're making a movie," I told myself, a line my old dispatcher used to use when I got jumpy. "Ain't nothing here but night." I climbed back up, shut the door, turned the hazards off. The CB gave a little crackle, and then a voice bled through, thin and far like it came down a tunnel, northbound. Help. I leaned forward, thumbed the squelch. Say again. You, cutting out. You got a handle. Silence. Then the reefer's hum dipped a note, the way an engine does when a fridge door opens and lets all the cold spill. My arms pebbled under my jacket. I told myself maybe a handheld had bled over, some kid with a toy radio on a back porch miles away. The road remained a black ribbon, my beams ending in a fixed white wall. I signaled, pulled back out. Eased up to 60 again. You don't realize how many mile markers you count until the numbers stop mattering. I watched for 199 and didn't see it. The next green sign that kicked up in the lights said 198 again. I told myself I'd misread it, but at 12:23 the dash clock reflected in the windshield like a duplicate. The GPS still showed a straight segment with no exit names. The reefer's cycling settled into a rhythm that matched my own breath. The radio hissed and sorted itself. Northbound. Don't leave me. The voice was wrong in a small way. It came through like a female dispatcher trying to sound professional, but there was no room tone behind it. No hum of ceiling lights, no clatter of keyboards. Just her words and the hiss of the universe. I thumbed the mic out of reflex. You're bleeding over, ma'am. What's your 20? You in a ditch. You got a plate. Water smell rose in the cab. Not diesel, not cool and clean. Cold water that carried a trace of asphalt, rain on sand. I checked the floor mat. Dry. I checked my cuffs. Dry. The air itself felt damp. A cold that slipstreamed under my jacket, through my shirt, into the hollows of my elbows. Something white flickered by on the passenger side. Not headlights. Not a reflector fabric. A dress, maybe. The hem worried by wind. I swung my eyes there and saw only cattails leaning toward the road like a congregation bowing dot at 12:29. A diner showed up like a mirage. Pale neon that had given up on being bright decades ago hummed against the dark. Coffee opened 24 hours. But the 2 was dead and the S in hours buzzed just enough to make the O look nervous. I hadn't been planning to stop. Every minute off the road was a minute I'd regret in the morning when the receiving clerk pretended not to see the red line on the schedule. But the wheel wasn't mine anymore. My hands turned without asking and I coasted into the gravel lot. Inside, the light was too clean. Fluorescence that gave everything the color of a hospital hallway. The smell of burnt coffee and hot grease and a sweetness that didn't belong like wet cotton. Booths were empty. A jukebox crouched by the door, owning the silence. An old waitress with hair the color of cigarette. Ash wiped the counter as if she could erase the years that had stuck to it. You look like a man who saw her, she said without putting down the rag. No greeting. No what'll it be. I watched the steam from the coffee pot twist, thin white ghosts rising and vanishing. Saw who? She pointed with her chin toward the wall beside the pie display, where the photos of county softball teams and church bake-offs hung in a web of yellowing tape. In the middle, dead center, where your eye would end up even if you didn't mean it, a frame held a press clipping. The woman in the photo wore a white dress. Not a wedding dress, summer cotton, simple. Something you'd wear to keep cool in a car with a broken AC. Her hair was in a loose braid then, not plastered to her skull. The caption said, "Local teacher killed on Highway 41. 10 years ago." The paper had drawn her name out like it wanted to apologize. Maria Ellis, 29. The waitress poured coffee without my asking. The liquid smelled burnt and somehow comforting. She waves at drivers, the woman said. Some see her. Some don't. The ones who stop, she shrugged. They come in here thinking they're thumbing a ride out of a dream. But you can't leave a place you never arrived in. That's a riddle, I said, but it didn't come out sharp. She drowned in the ditch, the waitress said. Car flipped in the rain. Couldn't get the seatbelt off. Folks said the ditch was shallow. Doesn't take much water if your air's running out. You go quiet real easy when you think you're going to solve it in the next breath. My coffee tasted like it had been cooked with the same burner as grief. My hands warmed round the cup. My fingertips felt numb, like they'd been in snow. The CB on my belt, an old habit, a handheld eye clip there for ease when I stopped clicked, even though it was off. I looked down and the LCD glowed with a faint green like an insect belly. Northbound, the voice said from the dead radio, softer now. Please. The waitress didn't flinch. She says that to the ones who drove past the night she died. I stopped, I told her, surprised at the heat in my throat. I got out. She wasn't asking 10 years ago, the waitress said, voice not unkind. She was just waving. I left a 5 on the counter I didn't remember pulling from my wallet. The neon outside buzzed, polite as I went back to the truck. Gravel sounded like bones grinding. The night had grown somehow thinner. The marsh lay still, a black table set with broken stars. Back on 41, the markers finally moved along. 199 appeared where it belonged. 200 came up with a little lean, like always, the numbers reflecting soft and green. I felt the steering wheel's old shimmer return, the trapped fly buzzing in the column. Everything that had been wrong regained its familiar wrongness. It should have calmed me. It didn't. At 12:53, the windshield fogged from the inside, a veil rising slow. I cracked the defrost. The fan coughed and blew air that smelled like drowned pennies. My breath wrote and erased itself on the glass. The reefer purred on the other side of the cab wall, steady as a heart monitor, refusing to acknowledge any world except the one inside its insulated box. Meat and ice, ice and meat. Safety through cold. The CB spit and then settled. Cole, it said, my name this time. My actual name, not handle. I didn't breathe. Northbound, Maria. I said before I knew I'd say it. Saying her name made the cab feel smaller, the way you get when you say fire in a crowded room. A drop hit the back of my hand. Not condensation from the vent. Not sweat. The drop moved like a slow tear, and it was cold in a metallic wail, like the water in a ditch that has been eating at culvert rust for a decade. I looked up. The headliner was dry. The drop had no origin but itself. Where are you? I asked the dark and the glass and the humming. Don't leave, the voice said. Not a threat. Not quite a plea. Something like instruction, or a rule learned too late. Lights bloomed in my mirrors, white at first. Then that peculiar sodium color that old halogens carry. A pair of headlights hanging low, as if the car rode with its nose dipped. They came up without gaining, holding a steady 2 lengths back. I checked my speed. 61, legal. The lights stayed. The CB breathed my name again, softer. Like the thing inside, it had moved farther underwater. Somewhere between 102 and the first suggestion of morning. I drove with those lights behind me. They never passed. They never fell away. I tried to lose them by easing down to 50. They eased with me. I pushed to 67 and felt the reefer complain, but the lights held, 2 stars anchored to my rear view. When I blinked, they became eyes for a second, and then they were lights again. At the way station, south of the split, the sign flashed closed, but I pulled in anyway. The building was dark, windows black, sodium lamps throwing their hiss over the truck scale. Gravel popped under my tires. I stopped in the dead center and put her in neutral, foot on brake. The lights behind me didn't pull in. They just went out. Not off, out. 1 second there, next second, not. The way a TV screen goes black and you still feel the heat of it. In the scalehouse glass. I saw my own cab reflected, a dim aquarium. Green gauges glowing, my face floating pale above the wheel. Over my shoulder, for the briefest bolt of a heartbeat, a white shape. Like someone had wiped a dress across the back of my seat with a wet hand, and the fabric had left its imprint in cold. I breathed until I could feel the steering again. I rolled off the scale and back to the road. The sun eventually arrived the way it always does, unsure of itself in the first minutes. The marsh changed colors, slowly black to navy to bruised purple to a kind of honest gray. Trucks appeared around me like men waking in a barracks, one by one, joining the line. I made my drop on time. The receiving clerk didn't look up when he stamped me. On his corkboard, there were the same HR flyers, the same color-coded shift calendars. In one corner, a clipping hung under a pushbin. Local teacher remembered. Somebody had written Maria on it in blue pen, as if the paper might forget. In daylight, you can explain a lot of night. You say your eyes invented faces from cattails and fog. You say radios bleed. You say water finds its level and memory does too. You tell yourself the road bends reality sometimes because long lines do that to the mind. When I shower in a truck stop now, I startle at the sound of water on tile, like someone knocking from inside a wall. When the CB is quiet too long, the silence feels shaped, like a person makes it. Sometimes, at the edge of sleep in the cab, I hear the reefer drop a note, and I wait for a voice that might be hers. The way a man waits for a train whistle that doesn't run anymore. The waitress was right. You can't leave a place you never arrived in. You just keep driving through it until the line between the map and the world is thin enough to see the ditch beneath dot. And if you roll 41 on a hollow midnight and catch a white flicker by the water, don't ask me what to do. I did both. I stopped and I drove on. Either way, when the radio breathes and says your name, you will learn what kind of person you are by what you answer. I keep my mic hung on its clip now. I don't touch it when the air smells like rain on hot pavement and something colder underneath. I look ahead and count the leaning markers and tell myself each number is new. But every so often the glass fogs from the inside. And I still hear a wet fabric dragging across gravel when the CB goes quiet. 31 years on the road, mostly west. Kenworth T680 under me now. Dry van behind. Palletized server racks, wrapped in grey film, headed to a data center outside Fernley I'd picked up in Salt Lake. Ran I-80 across the salt crust, then cut south to Catcher's 50 because dispatch swore it'd dodge a wreck near Lubbock. That's the kind of math you learn out here. Save 30 minutes by spending 2 extra hours with nothing but your own ideas for company. I don't mind the empty. The desert has a way of sanding down the noise. It was close to 3 a.m. when the world gets seated. The dash clock threw its pale digits into the glass. The hands on the wheel slick where the vinyl had worn shiny under my thumbs. Sky was a low dome, stars muted like somebody had breathed on them. The air vents pushed that dry, metallic cold you only get in high desert nights, when heat leaks out of the ground in thin lines and vanishes. I rode cruise at 62. Tires put a soft thread through the cab. On Channel 19, nothing except the tiny teeth of static chewing quietly, like a distant rain you couldn't get to. My route notes were rubber-banded to the visor drop window. 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, guard shack asks for bell driver. Must chock wheels, little reminders that tether the dark to daylight rules. Fuel was good. I had an open thermos of black coffee cooling into a smell like burnt toast and pennies. Us to 50 just lay there. 2 lanes taut across country the color of an old bruise. Blue-black sage. Pale salt flats. Occasional letterbox light from a ranch house miles off the road. Every so often, the wind ran a palm along the trailer side and the whole rig side at mile marker that should have been 173 thin green plate leaning away from the road as if trying to leave. I heard the click before I heard the voice. Anyone who's run with ACB knows the sound, the little throat clearing the universe does when it's about to cough up a person. Breaker 19. Need a hand. It came clean. Not like it had fought its way through a thunderhead. Male, maybe. Or a woman who'd talked too long in smoky rooms. There was a dryness in it, a rasp like a windshield squeegee dragged across dust. Nothing unusual about a check-in. Night breeds courtesy among the spread axle flock. I reached without thinking, thumbed the mic off its clip. Copy the breaker. You okay, out there? What's your 20? He laughed. Not mean, not friendly. Imagine a laugh that has forgotten why it exists and is repeating itself out of habit. It crawled round the edges of the cab and settled in the vents. Ray, the voice said, and I felt the wheel get lighter. You got time. I hadn't given my name. Not Ray, not Mercer, not my handle grey wire. I listened for the second voice that would explain the first one. Dispatch, a co-driver, a random with eyes on my dot number. The radio hissed like water on a skillet, a panicked fizz, and beneath it something I didn't want to name, soft, high, on the edge of hearing. Crying, I thought, then told myself, wind can imitate anything at 3 in the morning, if you let it. Say again. I kept my tone flat, the way you talk to a rookie who's about to do something expensive. You got a unit number. Milepost. You stuck in the soft. Silence spread thin and wide. It was the kind of silence that has shape that you could touch the edges of, like a bowl upside down over your head. The reefer wasn't back. Their van was empty of cold, but the air inside the cab went meat locker on me anyway. Goosebumps ran like a zipper up my forearms and stalled under the fluorescent underglow of the gauge cluster. I reached to roll the window down and stopped when the tip of my finger touched glass that felt wet. Not condensation exactly. Damp in a metallic way, as if the desert had sweated iron. I scanned the mirrors out of habit, left and right, the convex circles catching nothing but dark and the ghost of my own running lights. I looked forward again, and the road seemed longer than it should be, as if the horizon had stepped back a notch. The GPS map froze the way apps freeze when they're waiting for a truth they don't want to receive. A blue wedge on a grey line. No next turn. Just the word continue. Breaker, if you need a hand, I can stop at the next turnout. I kept my voice in that narrow lane between bored and concerned. You throw a flash. Keep driving, the voice said. You're almost home. Home, a nothing word at that hour that turns heavy if you let it. I don't have one anymore, at least not a place you can set a coffee mug down without apologizing to a roommate. There's a post office box and some boots under a motel bed in Winmucker that know the shape of my feet. If he'd said Fernley, if he'd said my drop, I would have chalked it to a prank and turned the radio down. But he said home like it meant something we hadn't agreed on. I turned the volume knob left. The number fell to 0. The LED bar gave up the ghost. The speaker continued to breathe, thin and tinny, like an AM station from far away, refusing to quit. I palmed the power and held it until the face went dead. The hiss stayed. The faint crying threaded the dead speaker's paper, cone-like wind through a coat sleeve. Keep driving, the notch radio said again, almost. My hands went to their places on the wheel, left at 10, right at 2, as if that could keep the world from widening unfairly. Common sense inventory, aliens, ghosts, sunstroke, boredom, prank. The desert is good at teaching you what you'll accept without proof. My stomach held the hollow coin of bad coffee. I breathed shallow so I wouldn't taste the metal. I watched for signs, literal ones. The blue reflective call, 511 for road. Conditions, the next white speed limit. A green town name that would anchor me back into a country where letters are instructions. But the night had flattened everything. The mile markers, when they came, were wrong in a friendly way stuck between numbers. The 1s and 7s bowed, the paint half peeled like skin after sunburn. I rolled past the same leaning post twice. I knew its scratch mark. I knew the bullet ding in the corner. Twice, at 3:11, my side window breathed in. Not an open gap, not a seal failure. The glass itself flexed cold against my arm. The CB mic line lay across my thigh where I'd dropped it. It twitched like a wire with a small animal inside. My name brushed the inside of my hearing again, softer. Ray, who is this? I asked the empty road. You got a license? A trailer number? Say something that puts you in front of me. Wind rose suddenly, steady as a faucet opening. It poured into the cab, though every vent was on reset, and every dial pointed away. The smell rode it ozone before a storm, burnt rubber like someone had locked their brakes miles out. Rain on sand that didn't exist here, not tonight. The wheel's familiar vibration. Every old truck has its unique tremor faded, until my hands felt suspended on air. No tire sing, no driveline thrum, just the idea of forward motion. In the mirror, for a second, that hurt to look at. My running lights reflected something that wasn't me. Not a car, not a truck. A smear of light tall as my trailer, narrow as a thought, pacing me out of frame. My heart knocked once, hard enough that I said out loud, no. I said it like a request. The voice came back on 19, except the radio was still dead. The truck's own bones carried it, I think. The door panel, the plastic seams. The spaces where heat lives in the day and cold at night. He didn't laugh this time. Ray, don't key up. I didn't. I've learned in old bars, old lots, old marriages. There are moments when you establish a treaty with a thing by not answering it. Ahead, a turnout opened like a mouth. It was one I'd used when my first marriage died, on the phone with a long beep that meant not answering anymore. A rusted trash barrel sat under a street lamp that only remembered how to flicker. The whole place looked like you'd cut it from time with a dull knife and left it there to dry. I braked, slow enough not to wake the load. Gravel popped under. Weight, each stone reporting up through the frame into my ribs. I set the brake and the air let go with that sigh that sounds like a person defeated. The cab lights came on and made the night outside look darker. My breath had a silver edge in the beam. The windshield had fogged from the inside, feathered with lines like a map of rivers. I drew a finger through them to make a clear place to look. The line closed behind it. The glass wanted to forget I'd changed it. Somebody knocked. Not on the door, not in a normal place. 3 soft taps from inside the dash, like knuckles on a hollow table. I froze. I stared at where the radio lived, in the plastic. The face was black. The mic lamp was dead. Behind it inside, the guts were cheap speakers and cheaper wire hide. I heard that dry laughter again, then something else. A whisper that was only life because it contained breath. Ray, it said, like a lover trying not to wake anyone. Don't look in the mirrors. Of course I did. You would too. It's stitched into Estelle, a man not to, and you've assured he will. Both mirrors held the turnout. Lamppost, barrel, my own cab awful with interior light. In the convex, a thing leaned behind my shoulder, white as if bleached in sun that doesn't exist at night. Not a person made of bone and decision. More like a crease in the air shaped into a person's idea. A suggestion of a jaw. The outline of a hand resting on the seat back close enough that if I turned, my temple would brush it. I did not turn. The crying rose again, nearer now, threading the air above my head like wiring. It wasn't one person. It was a crowd trying not to be heard. The wind stopped, and without it, the desert felt like a large animal holding still. The dashboard plastic ticked as it surrendered heat. The radio's dead speaker let a whisper through I could almost understand. It was a frequency that was less sound than pressure. In the mirror, for a second, that hurt to look at. My running lights reflected something that wasn't me. Not a car, not a truck. A smear of light tall as my trailer, narrow as a thought, pacing me out of frame. My heart knocked once, hard enough that I said out loud, no. I said it like a request. The voice came back on 19, except the radio was still dead. The truck's own bones carried it, I think. The door panel, the plastic seams. The spaces where heat lives in the day and cold at night. He didn't laugh this time. Ray, don't key up. I didn't. I've learned in old bars, old lots, old marriages. There are moments when you establish a treaty with a thing by not answering it. Ahead, a turnout opened like a mouth. It was one I'd used when my first marriage died on the phone with a long beep that meant not answering anymore. A rusted trash barrel sat under a street lamp that only remembered how to flicker. The whole place looked like you'd cut it from time with a dull knife and left it there to dry. I braked, slow enough not to wake the load. Gravel popped under. Weight, each stone reporting up through the frame into my ribs. I set the brake, and the air let go with that sigh that sounds like a person defeated. The cab lights came on and made the night outside look darker. My breath had a silver edge in the beam. The windshield had fogged from the inside, feathered with lines like a map of rivers. I drew a finger through them to make a clear place to look. The line closed behind it. The glass wanted to forget I'd changed it. Somebody knocked, not on the door, not in a normal place. 3 soft taps from inside the dash, like knuckles on a hollow table. I froze. I stared at where the radio lived in the plastic. The face was black. The mic lamp was dead. Behind it inside, the guts where cheap speakers and cheaper wire hide. I heard that dry laughter again, then something else. A whisper that was only life because it contained breath. Ray, it said, like a lover trying not to wake anyone. Don't look in the mirrors. Of course I did. You would too. It's stitched into Estelle, a man not to, and you've assured he will. Both mirrors held the turnout, lamppost, barrel, my own cab awful with interior light. In the convex, a thing leaned behind my shoulder, white as if bleached in sun that doesn't exist at night. Not a person made of bone and decision. More like a crease in the air shaped into a person's idea, a suggestion of a jaw, the outline of a hand resting on the seat back close enough that if I turned, my temple would brush it. I did not turn. The crying rose again, nearer now, threading the air above my head like wiring. It wasn't one person. It was a crowd, trying not to be heard. The wind stopped, and without it, the desert felt like a large animal holding still. The dashboard plastic ticked as it surrendered heat. The radio's dead speaker let a whisper through I could almost understand. It was a frequency that was less sound than pressure. Almost, the voice said again, almost home. I pulled the CB fuse with shaking fingers. I unplugged the unit, left it dangling like a tooth in a child's grin. The noise didn't care. It lived in more places than a radio can live. I pressed my palms against the wheel until the bones protested. Okay, I said. Drive, or sit. Pick one. I pushed the brake in, felt the weight shift. I eased back onto the road, and the tires found their familiar song again but higher, as if sung by thinner throats. The thing in the mirror thinned with the distance between the turnout and me, until it was only a white argument in the glass. I kept my eyes forward, and counted the reflectors zipping under the beams. Red, white, 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 red. The rhythm steadied the air in my lungs. By 4:02, the sky had a bruise in the east that promised day. The GPS decided I existed again and drew a timid arrow. A sign with real, sharp letters finally admitted that Fallon was a number of miles I could carry in my pocket. My hands still shook, but only the way they do after you lift a thing that was too heavy but you didn't drop it at the guard shack. The security man stamped my papers and asked if I'd had any trouble on 50. He had a radio at his shoulder, the new kind that talks like a polite robot. Over his left shoulder, inside the shack, a bulletin board held the usual safety posters, downed phone numbers, a faded flyer with a black ribbon drawn across the top, in memory of dispatcher Howell. 10 years old from the look. Somebody had scrawled "Home is the road" under it in blue ink. I took my signed bowl and kept my face the shape of a man who slept fine. Later, showering in the truck stop off 395. The water hammered my skull and the tile amplified small sounds into important ones. When I turned the faucet off, the last hiss in the pipe was the exact pitch of the CB static from earlier, and I had to steady my hand against the wall. I replaced the radio the next week. New unit, new mic. I even wrapped the coax with fresh tape, trimmed clean ends, good ground. It talks when I ask it to, and when I shut it off, it behaves like an appliance. But every few months, somewhere around 3 a.m., with the desert laid out like a sheet in a cold room, Channel 19 will click, even if I'm alone in my own head, and I'll hear a dry breath gather itself. Ray, keep driving, almost home. I don't key up. I don't answer. I count reflectors. I let the wheel buzz, and I pretend the night is a place and not a person. And when the CB goes quiet, the quiet has texture, like a whisper sliding along the inside of the cab, looking for a place to sit. 18 years Class A, most of it running I-40 and I-10, New Mexico to California and back again. I know the skeleton of that desert by heart, the way the road ribs up through the mesas, the varnish of starlight on the asphalt at 3 a.m., the smell of rain that almost happens and then thinks better of it. Rigs a Kenworth T680 with a 53-foot dry van. That night, I was westbound out of Tucumcari with 22 pallets of printer paper, shrink-wrapped so tight the trailer smelled like glue and hot plastic when I cracked it. Drop window at a wholesaler in Gallup, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. Easy math if I kept it clean. I could grab a 40-minute nap without dinging my clock. I'd been told about a rest stop out near Mesita that old-timers give a wide berth after 2 a.m. bad air. A Navajo driver told me once over coffee in Grants. Place don't want you. I nodded like men do when we file a note away and go on not believing it. Wind had died by the time I passed the Laguna Pueblo exits. That unsettled kind of calm pressed against the cab, like I was driving into a held breath. The sky was the desert's usual metal bowl, stars smudged like fingerprints on chrome. The air through the vents was that metallic cold you only get where day burns so hard the night has to overcorrect. Channel 19 was quiet one eastbound, complaining about a tire hiss. A local yard dog talking about a deer strike near Pruitt, then just CB static eating little bites out of the silence. The wheel had its familiar low tremor under my palms, like a trapped bee living in the column. That's comfort to me. Imperfect is honest. I rolled into the rest area at 2:11 a.m. Gravel crackling under weight, the sodium lamps throwing their sick honey color over picnic tables bolted to concrete. The New Mexico Department of Transportation map still lived in a display case under scratched plexi. The same sun-bleached photos of petroglyphs and caution about rattlers. A Coke machine hummed like it remembered when it had purpose. Bathroom lights flickered in a way that made you want to hold it. I idled the Kenworth long enough to back into a slot by the far fence line, then keyed the CB in case any westbound needed to know the lot wasn't full. Westbound, Redline parked up at the last Mesita stop. Plenty of room. I'm 10-2 for a catnap. The radio hissed, thoughtful. No reply. I killed the headlights. Left the parking lamps on for a minute until my eyes adjusted, then clicked them dark too. I logged off duty on the ELD, set the dashcam on parking guard old habit, cracked the sleeper curtain and slid back. The mattress held the shape of every mile I'd slept into it. I stretched boots off, jacket over my chest against the AC. The smell inside was paper glue from the load. Hot plastic ghosts from day. My own sweat turned cold. And under it all the metallic penny smell the desert brings at night, even with the vents. Set to resurg. I've learned to nap in slices. You let the mind idle and keep the body half awake for the noises that mean trouble. I wasn't fully down when I heard the first sound. Boots on gravel. Slow, not a hurry shuffle, not the springy crunch of sneakers. Work boots, heel toe, deliberate. They went past the driver door and circled the bumper. I could hear the tiny ping of cooling metal in the grille answering back. The steps paused under the passenger window, then moved toward the trailer, gravel grinding, then stopped. I slid a hand to the curtain and froze with 2 fingers in the fabric. The part of me that believes in simple explanations said highway patrol or another driver walking his legs awake. The part that's driven long enough to hear shape in silence said no one else was breathing out there. Even the wind seemed to be listening. Copy any westbound on 19. I whispered, stupidly, for comfort thumb, nowhere near the mic. The CB answered with a thread of static, like someone drawing a nail across foil. I waited until the steps didn't resume. Counted to 30. Counted to 30 again. The air inside the cab cooled another notch. Gooseflesh moved under my jacket like a slow wave. I eased the curtain, a sliver, and peeked. The lot lay wide and empty. The world was the color of a bruise under the lamps. My triangles sat rooted under the bunk where they belonged. I hadn't set them, hadn't needed to. No car, no patrol, no person. Gravel held footprints that didn't exist when my headlights were on. Straight lines of compression crossing and circling a truck no one stood near. I told myself coyotes had done it, or the light made lines where none were. Lie to survive. It's an old trick. I let the curtain close and turned my face toward the driver's seat, because that's where the human body expects safety to be. The wheel gleamed faintly. The windshield was an empty rectangle of desert dark. Every gauge wore its small halo. That was when the cab changed, not with a sound, but with an aftersound. The little pressure drop when a door closes and seals the air. Except no door moved. The door chime didn't complain. The locks didn't click. The pressure changed anyway. A cold draft moved across my cheek like the memory of a hand. The smell came with it, not diesel. Not rubber in summer. Burnt wire. The exact, thin electric reek you get when a harness rubs through on sheet metal and arcs. When insulation sacrifices itself and leaves the air metallic and sweet in the worst way. If you've ever watched smoke come out of a dashboard and felt your stomach drop before the fire extinguisher even left the bracket, you know it. The bunk light flickered once and went dead. The CB, still powered but volume low, caught a whisper inside its hiss. Not words at first. A breath being pulled through filters. Then a shape in it. Read, it tried. Like it had found the first syllable of me and was squeezing it between teeth that didn't line up. I raised on my elbow. The lever of the seat creaked the way it does when weight settles, but I hadn't moved. The driver's seat moved. It came forward a notch, the way a stranger does the first time he climbs into your rig and can't find your exact reach. The headrest blocked a hair more of the windshield's glow. I saw it in silhouette. Someone sat in the seat. Not someone. Something cut to the silhouette of someone. That's different. It had shoulders because the world had folded around a shape that way. It had a head because the interior light that wasn't on bent and refused to pass through a space in front of the wheel. It turned a fraction, not toward me. Toward the road, like all of us do. I watched its profile fail. Where eyes should have reflected something light, lamp fuzz. The small green galaxy of the radio's face there was black that absorbed. The mouth wasn't absent. It was refused. Smoothness where speech ought to live. I didn't move. The sound in the CB went higher. A thin cry layered under static, like someone far away calling through a hallway of weather. The vents breathed cold that tasted like rained on sand and pennies. The steering wheel's little tremor, the one that lives there, like a tame insect, faded, until my hands would have felt floating. If I'd had them on the leather dot. He, the shape. Was he, because that's what the seat said to my mind, leaned forward. The mirror on the driver's side flat, faithful ticked, as if thumbed, just a hair inward, correcting for eyes not mine. I know that minute click. It's the sound of someone who believes he has a right to your angle, breaker, I said finally, because saying nothing felt like giving away the cab. Got a visual at my seat. You boys playing games out here. The CB stopped pretending then. The speaker, even with the radio volume down near nothing, popped like a knuckle cracking and let a voice through. It carried no room noise, no engine hum, no air. Only words. Don't stay, it said, dry as old insulation. Not past two. My throat worked like it had grit in it. Yeah, I said, because what else do you say to a thing that speaks rules you already broke? Copy that. It turned all the space around it did. A shallow pivot that took away the fake profile and gave me the front. The black where eyes should catch light stayed black. The no mouth didn't open. Between one breath and the next, the smell of burnt wire intensified, bright and sweet and wrong. And a thin white thread of frost grew from the bottom corner of the windshield and crept an inch toward center like a cautious vine. It was New Mexico in late summer. My defroster was off. The frost didn't care. I blinked. Survival move. Reset the picture like a camera does when it can't find focus. The seat was empty. The frost line remained on the glass, delicate as a pencil mark. The mirror held its altered angle. The air kept its wire stink, hanging even after I yanked the HVAC to full heat. I sat there under a dead bunk light and let minutes fall off me like scales. I logged on, just in case my ELD would be a witness, and slotted the key. The Kenworth started clean, like a dog wanting out. The dashcam blinked its little red light to say it had something to tell me later. I eased out between the picnic tables and the lamp poles and let my tires find the soft song of the interstate. The CB sat quiet. The world retook its lay. White lines slid under the nose, steady as heartbeats. I checked the mirror, out of habit, caught the wrong angle, corrected it with a thumb my mind had to command twice. For a mile, the air in the cab kept that faint sugar metal smell of wire that has been too hot. Dawn teased up behind the mesas, pale grey, leaking into things that had been shapes and becoming objects again. The day shift took the dessert back. I made Gallup at 6:58 with a face the receiving clerk didn't comment on. And he's the kind who'll tell you look like death if it buys him 10 seconds of not scanning pallets. I pulled the SD card on the dashcam because I'm either a coward or a scientist, depending on the morning. Sat in my seat with the air still faintly wrung and scrolled the timeline on the tiny screen no one over 40 likes to use. At 2 hours 24 minutes and 12 seconds AM, The interior cam showed me under the jacket, in the bunk. At 2 hours 24 minutes and 18 seconds, the exterior mic caught boots on gravel clear as coins flipping. The lens sees what eyes deny the gravel shifting at the driver door in compression ovals. No one in frame. At 2 hours 24 minutes and 28 seconds, the driver's seat moved a notch forward with no visible cause. The mirror in frame ticked in a hair, reflective surface catching the sodium lamp and changing the angle of its glow by degrees. At 2 hours 24 minutes and 31 seconds, the windshield frosted at the corner. A bloom of white that grew an inch and thought about the second. A shadow, the shape of a man without features, sat where a man would sit, black at the eyes the way a hole is black. It stared ahead for exactly 6 seconds, so still the compression algorithm got lazy around it and made the pixels blocky. Then it wasn't there. The headrest regained its clean oval. The seat eased back the tiniest whisper as if relieved of duty. I watched that 6 seconds 3 times. I didn't export it. You'll say I should have. You'll ask why a man would erase his own proof. I'll tell you some freight you don't strap down because once it shifts, it doesn't stop. I don't park at Mesita anymore. I won't run the lot lines with my headlights off there either. If I need a nap, I take it with company to rigs nose to tail. Someone's generator coughing in a way that makes the air less available for other things. I changed out 2 sections of harness under the dash even though my voltmeter said they were fine. The stink of burnt wire still visits sometimes when the clock reads to 13, and the CB goes quiet in that respectful way emptiness gets when it's waiting to speak. People like stories with clean endings. Proof, a rule, a fix. All I have is a mirror that was wronged by a fraction and a frost line on my windshield on a warm night and a seat that moved for a thing that didn't have the courtesy to stay visible. When I pass that rest stop now, I check the time without looking like I'm checking it, and I keep a little pressure on the throttle like a man easing past a house where a dog is chained, and when the night is heavy and the road goes mute and my vents breathe metallic, I can feel the air behind my left ear cool, as if something without a mouth is leaning in. Watching the white lines unspool, content so long as I don't stop. 30 years behind a wheel. Southwest lanes, mostly Lubbock to El Paso, Pecos to San Angelo. The kind of emptiness that teaches you what your own thoughts sound like when they run out of words. I run a Peterbilt 579 13 speed drive van on this run. Load was light. 20 cases of replacement filters and 3 pallets of spill kits strapped tight against the nose. Delivery window in El Paso, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. Guard shack that always asks for the last 4 of your VIN like it's a secret handshake. I left Lubbock just ahead of sundown. Figured I'd make the state line around dawn if the wind didn't get cute. Wind is a kind of religion out here. The day had been a bulliedest devils spinning across cotton fields. Grit tapping at my glass like thrown rice butt. By midnight, it went quiet. The way a crowd goes quiet when the preacher steps to the mic. The sky turned the kind of metal that swallows stars. Out past Monaghan's, the land flattened into suggestion. Mesquite-like ink stains, fences stitching one darkness to another. The air through the vents had that metallic cold you only get when the day has boiled every smell down to metal and memory. Channel 19 was a low chew of static. Every now and then, a voice bled through us, bound talking steer weights. A tanker warning about a deer carcass near mile 214 and then it was the quiet again. Thick as wool, my wheel had its comfort tremor. A trapped bee living in the column. 62 on cruise, tires singing soft on the aggregate. GPS through a little blue wedge at a grey line that never changes. The road sign for a ranch turnoff came up prefem number that means something to a mailbox and nothing to me. And vanished in the dust my own trailer made. That was when I saw them. 3 sets of taillights, faint and steady, floating low in the hanging grit. They weren't the white eye-level lead bars you get now. These were old red coins, deep and tired. The kind of glow that belongs to trucks that learned the world before I did. Perfect spacing between them. No drift, no brake flickers. Formation like a ruler had drawn it. Westbound convoy ahead, I keyed the mic, more for the comfort of my own voice. Y'all got ears. Grey wire behind you at your 5. Looking good. How about Elaine and your 20? The radio answered with the desert's usual breath. Then a grainy whisper cut through, not to me, not to anybody. A woman laughing once in a room far away, or a radio show tuned between stations. I had just as squelch. The laughter turned into a hiss, and then into nothing. The 3 trucks held their lanes the way photographs hold still. I eased a little closer, a gentleman's pace. The dust they kicked was light, just enough to hang back from my bumper and make halos around my lights. No plates on the rear doors. No dot stickers. The trailers were boxy, tall in that old way before aero mattered, corners sharp enough to cut dawn. I tried to read a company name stenciled ghost grey along one side. The dust erased it the way an eraser erases pencil from paper softly, as if it felt bad. Convoy, you got a copy. I tried again, polite. 3 ahead on 285. If you're running silent, flash me or I'll pass you on the left. They didn't flash. They didn't answer. They didn't change. I matched them, fell into their rhythm, and the road fell out from under all of us at once. Not the pavement my tires still hummed, their small song, but the feeling that tells your hands the world is correct. The wheel's tiny vibration faded. The glass over the gauges put a shiver through my reflection like heat above a grill. I watched for mile 229. The green sign leaned the wrong way and then didn't appear at all. The wind came back in a single long body, sliding through the seams of my sealed cab, like cold with a purpose. It carried the smell of rain on caliche, that wet chalk scent you get when a storm teases the desert and then leaves it at the altar. Under it, fried rubber, old as a highway patrolman's jokes. Ozone threaded the edge as lightning, somewhere without a cloud to own it. Ahead, the 3 trucks veered. Not a signal. Not a wobble. A decision. In one smooth move they peeled right across the shoulder, missed the rumble strip like they had a map, and went through a barbed wire fence without the slightest acknowledgement that matter resists. Posts didn't jump. Wire didn't snap. It just lay there afterward, quiet, a black line against black grass. The rigs slid into the desert side by side, like ships into dark water. Their taillights kept that slow, respectful glow and then began to fade. Not with distance, but as if they were being folded into a different night. I braked. Soft at first, then harder. Mind writing checks I had no intention of cashing. The Peterbilt walked down to 20, then to a stop on the shoulder. Hazard lights ticked loud enough to count the seconds with. I could feel the heat lift off the hood and get lost immediately in the metallic air. I rolled the window a crack to hear the desert better. Wind pressed its face against the opening and breathed cold into me. My forearms pebbled under the fluorescence of my gauge cluster. The fence line was 15 yards off, silver wire singing a tiny note in the wind. No brakes, no tilt in the posts. On the far side, the mesquite held still like it was hiding something. My headlights fanned across the ditch and died against nothing special, colder. Don't get out, I told myself, which is a sentence that keeps men in their trucks or gets them killed, depending on the night. I got out anyway, because habit wins. Boots hit gravel. The sound was small and lonely and honest. The smell down there at ankle level was stronger wet dust and old rubber, the memory of a tire that burned out of sight. My triangles stayed in their bracket, because something about putting them out felt like calling attention. I walked to the fence, breath fogging one thin exhale at a time. Up close, the wire had a bite of frost, along it a sugar crust. Faint and wrong for West Texas in July. I touched it with a fingernail and it stung like licking a nut. The air on the other side felt colder. The sound was different there, too like the land had a lid on it. In the distance, too far to be real and exactly close enough to be heard, 3 engines idled. Not modern rumble. That straight 6 clatter with a throat full of gravel. The sound threaded the wind without moving it. I went back to the cab and shut the door softly, the way you do at a funeral. Sat with my hands on the wheel and watched the windshield fog along the bottom. Corners like a breath trying to pull itself into glass. The CB gave a slow, grainy cough. Channel 19, lit with a voice that wasn't anyone alive. It didn't have room noise behind it. Just desert. Just distance. Breaker, it said. A man's drawl from an era when men wore cigarettes in their sleeves. Convoy 3 clear of the wire. North-northwest on the ranch road. Make it to the county blacktop before she closes. The hair on the back of my neck stood up so hard it hurt. Convoy, I said, because I'm the kind of fool who answers. You got a plate? Company name? You boys all right? Static ate me and spat me out. Then the same voice, smaller, like it was happening inside my dash instead of over air. Keep your lane, Bo wins right tonight. He said my name like it belonged to him. The GPS hiccuped. The blue wedge shivered, then leaned left off the known line into blank grey. The screen printed State Route 78A, historic in italics where no such road has lived since before I was born. My headlights showed nothing where the screen showed a junction. Just fence and grass and the suggestion of a two-track, braided with time. I put the truck in gear because sometimes doing the obvious wrong thing keeps worse ideas from arriving. Eased forward 50 feet. A dust gust slapped the nose and broke around me, full of sand that rattled the undercarriage like thrown rice. In my mirror's taillights, I didn't have followed me 3 faint red coins hovering low. The reflections of a procession that wasn't behind me and was. For a moment, I felt the wheel go empty, no road in my hands. Just the idea of it. I could have turned right, I think, and followed the ghosts into wherever fences don't matter. I didn't. I bumped the centerline reflectors with my steer Tyra. Tactile Prayerand stayed on the asphalt the state pays for. The sound of the old engines rose, ran alongside, and then passed. The cab cooled as if a door had opened and a winter stepped in. Ozone slicked the top of my mouth. The smell of rain on sand went sweet and then metallic, like a battery held too long on the tongue. In front of the hood, dust condensed into shapes and then unshaped itself. Tall box trailers smeared into suggestion. Square noses with chrome grills that caught nothing. A rectangle of numbers flashed and failed on a mud flap. For a second, the right side mirror showed a company name painted in serif letters. Down a trailer, side Tri-County. Then the dust took it back. They veered away again. 3 together, smooth and practiced, heading north into ranchland. This time I didn't stop. I watched the fence as I rolled past. Watched the wire not move where they went through. Watched the posts smile, the same bored smile they had for 50 years. The wind changed its voice and the engines were gone. Not faded. Gone, like a song turned off mid-chorus. I made Van Horn around 4 and set the tires under the canopy of a fuel island. The clerk on the grave shift was a man with a face like mesquite, bark and a name tag that said Buddy in letters older than the register. He watched me fill my thermos with coffee that tasted like burnt pennies and rain. You ran the 35 last night? He asked without asking. South of Pecos, I said. Wind went still. Dust hung, but nothing heavy. He nodded. When it's right, he said, they run. He didn't make me ask 78. Sandstorm took a convoy north of the Caprock. 3 rigs. Men trying to stay nose to tail. Never found the trucks. Found a boot, a cap, a Bible open to a page about a pillar of cloud. Cattle broke the fence for weeks after, like they thought the road had moved to their side. Stories, I said. The way a man says a thing to keep it from stepping any closer. Yes sir, Buddy said, and highways, we got both. I made El Paso on time. Guard Shack asked for the last 4. I smiled, because the world had remembered itself. After the drop, I sat in the cab with the dash cam in my hand, thumb on the button. I don't always look. Sometimes the not knowing is the rope that keeps you from climbing over into a place you can't climb back from. This time, I scrolled. The forward-facing feed showed the 3 sets of taillights plain as day until the moment they veered. On the screen, the fence glittered where my high beams touched it. The trucks went off the road and kept going. The dash cam's date stamp jittered and printed July 13th, 1978. In the corner for 2 seconds, like a joke. The passenger side camera, cheap and honest, caught the red coins passing my door and climbing into the dark. The mirror showed Tri-County in letters I could pause and read. I scrubbed back. The letters weren't there the second time. The date held steady at the right century again. The fence remained unbroken. I didn't export the clip. Maybe the file corrupted when I formatted the card later. Maybe I decided the proof would make me a liar to myself. When I hit that stretch now, I listen for the wind the way a man listens for a key in a lock he's trying not to hear. If it goes still, if the road loses its hum and the glass tastes like pennies. I drop 2 miles per hour and let the line of white reflectors tell me I still belong where paint can find me. Some nights, the CB tastes like sand at the back of my throat, and a voice without room noise checks in a mile ahead. Not to ask for help, but to count. 1, then 2, then 3. And the dust on my hood swells as if someone's bumper has just cut it. You can say it's the wind carving old stories into new drivers. You can say I dreamed with my eyes open and my hands awake. I'll nod, I'll go on driving. But when the horizon goes from black to pewter, and the trucks around me turn into men again instead of ghosts, I keep glancing at the fence lines, looking for wire that doesn't move where something passed. And I count the seconds between my hazard clicks, because the night will sometimes count with me. I still hear engines out there, tucked into the static, sudden and old. And every time the CB goes quiet, the quiet feels like a lane opening up for 3 rigs I can't pass.